Welcome back, Fantasy Managers. This is Devo 1099 with Fantasy Football Backers. Game week 25, double game week. As you can see, I'm a bit tired. And unfortunately, I am solo again here between time zone differences and travel and all sorts of stuff going on. I was not able to get somebody to join me, but I can promise you I've got a decent amount to talk about here. Biggest news in the daily fantasy football industry in the UK is that Draftkings is finally taking registrations. They announced 2 days ago that Arsenal and Liverpool were new partners of theirs. Liverpool had previously been with Mondogoal, and Arsenal is certainly a big catch with personal interest. But more importantly, Draftkings is coming to the UK. We've been talking about it for a few months now. Started to include some DraftKings prices to get, a little bit of a gauge for how that is done, and I'll certainly go more in depth into that in this podcast, as I think there's a decent chance that you're going to be able to play on DraftKings Saturday and maybe pick up some of my my head-to-heads if you would like to take me on and use my own advice against me. But pretty exciting. I do think that assuming that the product launch goes smoothly, that you're going to be very happy with how DraftKings is set up. It is different than Mondogoal. Some obvious benefits are that there's a mobile site, and the mobile site, the app is actually fantastic. It's very user friendly. I'm able to make changes, for the other U.S. sports that might happen on a Friday night when I'm out at dinner and I have to excuse myself to go to the bathroom and change an NBA guy who got the flu. It's very simple to do that. Global player swap, late swap, all of the stuff that we've talked about intensely and hoped that Mondogoal was going to put forward, and they haven't delivered on that yet. So those are big changes. The scoring is drastically different than Mondogoal's, primarily due to corners and crosses counting a point each, and the ability to pile those up make much different players attractive than they would be on Mondogoal, and they're more predictable. The prices are starting to support those numbers. So Willian used to be down around 5,000 on DraftKings. Now he's 8,000. So the value is getting wrung out a little bit. So sorry that you're getting to this a little bit late. It'll be a little more difficult to make rosters or lineups, where you can have everybody that you want. But I like the challenge personally, and I think that the games have been getting pretty good of late. The overlap between teams has lessened, I believe, at least a bit, just as the pricing has gotten more efficient. So big news, and it sounds like they're going to pool the US and UK players right off the bat. So you'll be able to come in and play against the former Max Delory, known as Sahil Sud, who is just a dominant player across all sports in the U.S. Not the best Premier League player yet, but I have no doubt that he will start to sort it out and start to take everybody's money there as well. So it should be fun. I'm happy to discuss on Twitter if you see usernames that you're wondering, how good a player is this. I can only give a bit of an opinion. I don't want to give too much away, but I'm happy to chat about that and give you access. We could probably discuss some of that on one of these videos when the UK guys start getting involved. So for Game Week 25, I'm not going to lie, it's not the most attractive set of games, because the most interesting game, certainly for table purposes, would be City and Leicester. And that's the early game, so that's not going to be included in any of the big matches. So, if you are playing that game, I think it seems like after their first match at Leicester was 0-0, were some decent chances in that. It wasn't like this quiet game, but Leicester was happy to prove that they could stay on the same pitch as City. Since then, Leicester's probably been a better team, and they arguably, along with probably Spurs, have been the two best teams in the Premier League, certainly in the last 2 months or so. So it wouldn't be a shock to see Leicester play tough at the Etihad. I think Vardy, Aguero, Mahrez, this could be the type of game where the stars come out and there are goals. Just because Leicester's going to be on the counterattack, and that's where they excel. They're going to be able to go after Otamendi with company out, and I think there will be goals in that match. If you're going to take a wager, I would be I assume the over is somewhere around 2.5 or 3, maybe 2.5 for your little plus monies or paying a little more money. But no need to go too much deeper into that as we won't be playing it. So bit different, I think I'm going to do today. So I'm going to go position by position. I'm going to start with keeper. I think that on Mondogoal at 6.7 million, you've got Mignolet, who's hosting Sunderland, the most likely to keep a clean sheet pretty comfortably. He's going to be very highly owned, though, and frankly, Liverpool keepers all season have been making a lot of errors. So if you're in a large field contest, I think that going away from Mignolet is very reasonable. He is the most likely to keep a clean sheet. I think that is pretty overwhelmingly the case, and he's inexpensive at 6.7 million. So, the other options are Lloris, Forster, and Elliott were the ones I jotted down. Elliott is the cheapest at 5.1 million, but I don't know that I'd feel too comfortable with the Newcastle keeper. But like I said, if everybody is going to flock towards Mignolet and you can take Elliott and be in the 5% range and have the most inexpensive keeper, they could keep a clean sheet, or at least you could get a few saves. It's not like West Brom has a tremendous attack. They won't even play their best player in Berahino. So Lloris, might be another contrarian option because people will flock towards Mignolet. A little bit more expensive. Has to shut down Igalo and Dini, who still looked decent against Chelsea, even though they weren't able to convert. And then Forster is the most expensive because he's got 4 consecutive clean sheets since he's come back from injury and looked like the best keeper in the world against Arsenal. So tough to pay for him, but against West Ham, I think he's got a very reasonable chance of keeping a clean sheet. And, I probably wouldn't pay 9.1 million, but this isn't the most difficult slate to fit who you want into your team. So if you think that Forster's more comfortable than playing Mignolet, I'm not going to stop you from doing that. So moving over to defender, so we're essentially going to start looking at a lot of the players from the same teams that we're looking at keepers from. So for Liverpool, Moreno and Klein. Klein's price has come down just a bit, so he's south of 8 million now. Sorry, let me go back briefly. Now that we're discussing Draftkings, that was the whole point of me doing these separately. Keeper on Draftkings is a bit different. They have abandoned the 1 goal allowed bonus, so now it's either a clean sheet or nothing. That's worth 5 points. If you have a save, that's 2 points. If you allow a goal, that's -2. And the biggest difference is the win is worth 5 points. And this is probably the most predictable portion of what a keeper does. A clean sheet is typically about 50-50. To be honest, sometimes it's down towards 40%. Sometimes it's 65%. Liverpool is 11 out of 19 is about 55%, something in that range. But to win, Liverpool is probably, to win to nothing is their par. So I think they're probably about 1 to 3 to win, something like that. So call it 75% to win, 55% for a clean sheet. That's pretty strong in favor of chasing the win there, to get those 5 points. So let's say they get 5 points, they get the win, they win 3-1. He faces one shot on goal and lets it in. He's getting 3 points. That's not gonna cut it for 3,900. So that's where it can get very dangerous when you're taking a keeper for a team that doesn't really project to face much traffic at all. It can be great. They can get 1 save, a clean sheet, and a win, and they've got 12 points. And at 3,900 for Mignolet, you're going to take 12 points. The target for DraftKings, I think I shoot for about 3x, about 150 points. The way that I determine how to get to that 150 points is a little bit different. From a keeper, just generally, I'd like to get 8 to 10. I don't think it's too reasonable to expect a keeper to do what Forster did, and get, I think he had 10 saves, and a clean sheet, something like that. So, 2 or 3 saves, 1 goal allowed, and a win. Yeah, that's solid for me. Call it 3 saves, a goal. That's 4, and a win is 9 points. If I get 9 points from a keeper, I'm probably okay with that, unless there's a very obvious play that people are going to get onto. Or, to win a GPP is a different concept altogether. You're probably going to need more like 12 to 16 points from your keeper to be in contention there. But there are a few clean sheets every week, and typically, if you get a clean sheet, you're probably going to get a win on average. So they're out there just in terms of predictability, in terms of cash games, in terms of what we can control from our side before the games start. You're looking at the win primarily, then clean sheet, and then trying to balance traffic. That's the risk. Is if they're going to face a lot of shots. There's a chance that they allow 2 or 3 goals and only get 1 save, and then they're underwater. So very volatile position both on DraftKings and Mondogoal. The win probably gives it a little bit more consistency in terms of your expectations. So Hugo Lloris is 4,300, Forster is 4,100, Elliott is 4,000, Mignolet is the runaway favorite for all of that, and it's 3,900. So not exactly sure what happened on DraftKings with pricing there. They typically actually follow the win to nil odds pretty closely. So maybe just Mignolet being poor most of the season led to that. But a sleeper, you could look at Mark Bunn for 3,900 for Villa, but taking Bunn over Mignolet doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless it's in the large field format. Fabianski at 3,800, not a terrible play either. As I mentioned last week, you have to think that Guidolin will instill more of a defensive tactic. They don't have a poor team. Whatever happened with Swansea, under Monk. You just kind of have to shake it from your memory and look at the fact that they're a mid-table team. They're a fine middle-table team. They were a pretty solid team last year. They should stay up. They should recover. And they needed a steady guiding hand, and it looks like Guidolin can do that. So I wouldn't be upset with Fabianski there either. So cash games, you're taking Mignolet unless you really want to be creative. And just don't trust the Liverpool defense. I'm happy to trust Liverpool against Sunderland. Sunderland's not good. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's move on to Defender. So Defender on Mondogoal, we are more or less chasing clean sheets. We want to get clean sheets as inexpensively as possible. For Saturday's matches, that kind of leaves us, Newcastle's defense, maybe a couple Southampton defenders, Liverpool's, a little bit more priced in. There's a couple Spurs. You're probably spending close to $8 million per defender. If you're going to pay up, you can probably get some decent defenders in the mid sixes. Leandro Bacuna at $5.5 million, and this is a player that I think that ultimately, because I play more on DraftKings than Mondogoal, I may see Bacuna as a better player than he is, or a better fantasy player than he is, which is certainly a leak. But on DraftKings, when Verito is out, which he was 2 games ago, Bacuna takes pretty much all of the free kicks, takes some corners. He took split corners last game. So he's $5.5 million on Mondogoal, but would have to keep a clean sheet against Norwich to get there. It's 3,600 on DraftKings with upside, in the 15-point range, which is very, very attractive. If Verito is out, I think he becomes a must play, especially because he's playing more of a kind of defensive mid winger type role on the right for Villa. So, and Norwich is not very good. So Bacuna is definitely one to look at. Pinto has been a little bit disappointing for Norwich so far. Villa would be a good matchup for that. And he is $6.2 million on Mondogoal. He is $2,400 on DraftKings, which is very inexpensive. He only had 3 points last game. So that's a pretty bad game on DraftKings. From 2,400 for defender, because you've got 11 spots. If you don't think a player can get 10 points for you, I don't think that it's really a good idea to take him. If 3 is a reasonable potential output, unless you're able to spend that money on very certain points at other positions, 3 can certainly sink you. Things are going to happen. You're going to take Kyle Naughton. He's going to get a BS red card in a match and cost you some money and get you negative 3.5. I'm very much speaking from experience. But in general, you want to be able to at least think you can get 10 from every position. If a guy at 2,400 comes in and gets you 6, you can live with that. That's about 2.5 times. If he can get you 8, that's fine. 10 is kind of the number I'm looking for. I at least want that potential. I think Pinto has that potential against Villa. I think people will sour on him after a 3-point performance, and justifiably so. But if he's in the lineup, there is certainly a possibility for him to get to 10. And so, DraftKings defender scoring. Like I said on Mondogoal, you're looking for clean sheets. Passes completed count, goals count, assists count. Shots on goal do not count on Mondogoal for defenders. So clean sheets are really the driving force. Tackles 1 can help, interceptions help. But it's more of a defender actually doing defender things or being able to be in the attack and getting assists or goals is how you can win. On Mondogoal, DraftKings is not entirely different, but there is no 1 goal allowed bonus. The clean sheet bonus is only 3 points. So if you're expecting 10 points and the only potential of a clean sheet is only worth 3 points, and if they allow a goal, you get 0. I find myself not necessarily looking for clean sheets at all as defenders. Certainly by the end of the match, when you get the bonus awarded and you watch yourself vault up because of it, it's nice to get a clean sheet. But it also is a byproduct typically of selecting defenders that are on teams that are going to possess the ball more, because on Mondogoal you get points for completed passes. You don't get that on DraftKings, but you do get crosses, as I mentioned. You get shots. You get shots on target. If you take corner kicks, which only a very few defenders do, Baines, Bakuna occasionally, Fuchs occasionally. Those players are worth their weight in gold. Moreno used to be taking corners. It seems like he has been somewhat stripped of that duty, so he's now overpriced at 4,500. Obviously, this is a fantastic matchup. He could get back to getting the point where he's getting 13 to 15 points. He almost needs to do that. And if he's not taking corners, then the opportunity to do that is certainly diminished. And I don't like to spend 4,500 on a defender on DraftKings. So on Mondogoal, you're typically trying to spend as little as possible on your defenders, but having a very good shot, or at least a competitive shot at a clean sheet. And, if you can get a guy that scores a goal, that's just the cherry on top. But on DraftKings, the most attractive defenders are going to be the ones that cross, pretty consistently, and it's not priced in entirely yet, or they're going to be in a match where they do possess the ball primarily. So from that standpoint, there are a number of good plays this week where I think that a team is probably going to have more possession than they do typically. Therefore, that if they have an average price, then they're going to be able to exceed their totals. So one player I jotted down, Daryl Janmaat for Newcastle. He can get very involved in that attack. It sounds like they might start Doumbia up front, which I'll get to him specifically later. But he's a big man in the box and can get on the end of one of Janmaat's crosses. West Brom sits back, allows, I think, the most crosses in the league, or somewhere very close to that, which really opens things up for Janmaat. I see 15 points is very reasonable for him, and I think he's 4,400. He's 7.4 million on DraftKings. Excuse me, I'm gonna keep confusing this on Mondogoal. With more of a goal of getting like 7 or 8 points. So he's definitely a good value on DraftKings. It's going to depend on where you spend your money elsewhere. Pricing is definitely solid this week. I have him on my team now. I think I'll probably stick with him, but if value, exposes itself through the lineups due to rotation on a double game week, then I'm willing to cut Janmaat just because at 4,400, you're looking at 13 points or so as being your target if you're going for 150, and 13 is a good game for him. So I don't think he's necessarily going to get 20, and so you can get away with not taking him if you're pretty confident in where you're spending your money elsewhere, and in the cheaper defenders that you're getting. So. Like I said, Bakuna at 3,600 on DraftKings is going to be a great play if Verito is out. Even if he plays, they were down a man for 75 minutes against West Ham. So be a totally different type of game for Bakuna. He underperformed, but now they're going to be at home against Norwich and should have a decent amount of the ball. So I see 10 to 13 points for him as being a good target, and would be plenty to justify 3,600. Moreno, as I mentioned, 4,500. His cross numbers have been diminished. He can probably get you, 10 points pretty easily. They could get a clean sheet. He had 5 crosses last match, but just 3 combined in the 2 prior matches. One of those was a match against Norwich where there's all those goals. He had 1 cross, 6 total fantasy points on DraftKings. That's not going to do it at 4,500. That's going to sink your team. So that's scary enough to me. And Cedric is the exact same price. he is coming off a slightly down match against Arsenal where he had 8 points. If you watch that match, Arsenal had most of the ball, and for him to even get 8 points is pretty impressive. He had a string of, I think, 6 or 7 matches before that where he was in double digits, and now he gets West Ham, where Southampton, at St. Mary's should have a lot of the ball. So, again, these guys that cross are going to be much more attractive on DraftKings. Those players are still attractive on Mondogoal because they can get assists, but the clean sheet is going to be much more important for you to try to chase on Mondogoal than it is on DraftKings. So along with Cedric, Bertrand's okay. He's been kind of removed from corners. Excuse me. Oviedo is an interesting play. So in addition to crosses and corners, DraftKings also has defensive stats, tackles, 1, and interceptions, which tend to be, to me, somewhat unpredictable on a game-to-game basis. You do know the players that are capable of it. So a guy might average, 2 tackles and 2 interceptions a game, which would be worth 3 points. Interceptions are worth half a point. Tackles are worth a point. But over time, they might have one game where they have 1 tackle, one where 0 tackles, one game with 4 tackles. So you know who's capable of getting them. You don't know when they're going to get them. You can make the argument. I haven't done the analysis. You could certainly make the argument that when they're in matches where they are projected to lose and have less of the ball, then they have more opportunity to tackle players. I don't know if that bears out or not. I certainly don't use that in making my teams. But a guy like Oviedo, if he plays again for Baines, I think Baines probably plays. They may have just been resting him because it was a double game week. Baines again takes corners. Is probably the most expensive. He has 4,800. I believe he's the most expensive defender outside of Kolarov. But Oviedo had, I believe he was credited with 6 tackles on DraftKings against Newcastle, 3 crosses. He had 13 points, and he's 2,700 this week. So, Stoke is a tougher match. He's going to Britannia, but a player that at 2,700 can get you 13 points is great. That's over 4x. That's definitely something that we'd be very interested in. Palace defenders Dan and Suarez, not that attractive. That's a player where on DraftKings you're just not taking a player like Dan, but on Mondogoal you might be able to get away with that. I don't take center backs typically on DraftKings. It can be potentially decent GPP play because if you get the goal on a set piece or something like that, obviously that's going to shoot you up the standings because they're going to be very low owned. But probably not the best strategy. Glenn Johnson for Stoke looks good actually on Mondogoal and DraftKings. Jagielka back for Everton is a good play on Mondogoal. But that's essentially what I'm looking at there. So now we'll get to the midfield. So for Mondogoal, midfielders are typically the most expensive players or close to it outside of the very efficient strikers. Because they're able to pile up points with passes, with shots on target, with goals, with assists, fouls won. That's fairly predictable on a general basis for Mondogoal. Add to that on DraftKings, you've got, as I am going to constantly mention, you've got crosses and you've got corners. So the midfield is where the pricing was most inefficient when they first made the changeover, when they added corners, because the vast majority of teams use midfielders to take their corners, and you're getting anywhere from 3 to 10 corners per game. In a match where you're really in an advantageous position, you might get more than that. I think Matt Ritchie against Newcastle earlier this season had something like 15 corners. It was just it was crazy. That was one of the first games after DraftKings made their changes. So some players that you're going to look at in the midfield where you might not have looked at them on Mondogoal, and they might be more attractive on DraftKings. Because on Mondogoal, you kind of want guys that are going to be involved in goals. Not that you don't on DraftKings, but you can win without it. You can win on DraftKings when your team doesn't have a single goal or assist. It happens. It's not common. Goals and assists are still worth a lot more. Goals are worth 10 plus the shot on target and shot, so they're worth 12 points. Assists are 6 points and usually come off a cross, so often 7 points, or a corner or free kick or something. So assists are generally 6 or 7, mostly 7. Goals are 12. You're going to look at players that I think the kind of the poster boy for this at the beginning was Robbie Brady. Hasn't been playing. He didn't play last week and hasn't been playing very well prior to that because he's been buried at left back. But when he was playing up, he was a machine. He was taking shots on target. He was in play for assists. He was taking corners. He was taking set pieces. He was fantastic. He wasn't a very good play on Mondogoal. He would probably get you 3 or 4 points max, and would probably get you a yellow card or something, or have 3 or 4 fouls. But that's the type of player that it's going to be hard to wrap your head around that. And like I said, that's a leak for me moving from DraftKings to Mondogoal. I look at a player like Robbie Brady, and somewhere in my head I have a positive opinion of him because he's probably won me a lot of money on DraftKings. So I might be more inclined to play him on Mondogoal when it's just not a very smart thing to do. Obviously, I would like to unpack that, but easier said than done. So tracking corner kicks is arbitrary as that seems, and I would prefer that they didn't use them. But tracking corner kicks is very important, and we play by the rules that DraftKings is going to give us. One positive of that is they are more predictable. If you know who's going to take the corners, or you know that they split, or you know that when this guy's on the pitch and this guy's not, then this guy takes the corners. That all works in your favor. Sometimes it blows up in your face. Sometimes Kevin De Bruyne gets injured, and you assume David Silva is going to take all the corners, and Navas takes some along with him, and severely diminishes Silva's performance as he did last week against Sunderland. A lot of people took him. I think he was still a good play, as far as the information that we had before the match, but certainly disappointing. That's the type of thing where if you take a guy that's only for corners and then watch him lose corner duty, as Newcastle may have happened with, say, Jose Perez when Shelby came into the team and started taking corners, that just takes half the value out of Jose Perez. And as we'll get to when we get to strikers on DraftKings, the players that take corner kicks as strikers are worth their weight in gold on DraftKings. So that in mind, James Milner, while Coutinho's been out, he has pretty much taken over most of the corner duty for Liverpool. His price is fair. He might be on penalty duty. We haven't really seen a penalty, I don't believe, in a while with Liverpool, with Benteke off and Coutinho off and him on. So Milner's a good play. Henderson gets a decent amount. He's not typically involved much in goals and assists, or hasn't been. He does get a fair amount of crosses because he plays a little bit more of a defensive mid role. He also gets some tackles and interceptions. So in a game against Sunderland, I think Henderson could be a very solid play both on DraftKings and Mondogoal. Milner as well on both sites, I think will be popular. Jordan Ibe, has taken a couple corners. I don't think you can count on that, but his price is down to 3,300 on DraftKings, 5.7 million on Mondogoal. So if he draws a start as the right wing, he is very much in play there, which has been rumored. Liverpool's going to be popular. You're going to want 3 or 4 players from Liverpool, whether you choose their defense or their attack or mix it up. It's kind of going to depend on what other players you're looking at. Sunderland, they've got Khazri, who came over from Bordeaux, who was kind of their do-everything player. Think of him as a mini Payet. He's going to be a good player for Sunderland. He came on and in 45 minutes had, I believe, 7 crosses. Took a shot. Lens is now hurt, so that opens up more time for him. I would assume that he'll be able to go at least 75. The big problem being that now he is going to Anfield. Liverpool doesn't give up many crosses, but he should be on set pieces. He should be on corners. He is just 2,900 on DraftKings. I think he's unplayable on Mondogoal at 8.3 million. So that's one where you're going to put that in your back pocket and wait for him to get a more manageable fixture before you're going to use him on Mondogoal, because he's still tied to his Ligue price. But I think at 2,900 on DraftKings, just because the pricing is difficult, you're going to want to look very hard at Khazri. Villa and Norwich, as I mentioned, for Norwich, Robbie Brady has been out, has been playing left back anyways, so I don't think he's a tremendous option. Redmond is a better Mondogoal player than he is a DraftKings player because he's not taking corners. He doesn't really cross particularly much. But against Villa, if he's starting, you have to look at Redmond. He might be a good GPP play on DraftKings if you think he can get involved in some goals. Jarvis, if Brady's out, does take the corners, and he is 3,200 on DraftKings. He is just 4.7 million on Mondogoal. So again, this is a big difference where he might be a player that you're very excited to take on DraftKings, and can get value and then some even without being involved in a goal. He almost has to take some shots or do something out of the ordinary on Mondogoal to even hit 4.7 million. He probably won't kill you. But like I said, it's like, are you really going to turn to a player that you're hoping to do 5 points without particularly strong upside? I doubt it. So for Villa, you've got Verito, but like I said, he's splitting corners with Bacuna. His price has gone up. Carlos Heel is also there. Scott Sinclair may be starting because Jordan Ayew's on a red. Gested is potentially injured again. Kozak, I believe, is going to miss out. So they're way down on strikers. So I think they're going to start at Lahore in the middle, and Sinclair probably up as a left wing. So he's not a terrible play. He can score. Last time we saw that when he started, he was on penalty duty as well. So that makes him very interesting on Mondogoal in particular. He's only 3,000 on DraftKings as a midfielder. So more of a GPP play on DraftKings, maybe more of a core play on Mondogoal if he's starting at left wing. It's an interesting world where Scott Sinclair can be a player we seek out, but here we are. Moving on to the Newcastle-West Brom game. Shelvey has been taking a lot of corners and free kicks for Newcastle. He didn't do a whole lot against Everton because Newcastle as a team was completely ineffective against Everton. Happy to just throw that one out. there are crosses to be had against West Brom, as I mentioned with Janmaat. This could be the type of game where Shelby is home in front of the Newcastle faithful and ready to perform for them. And player I would take a long, hard look at on both Mondogoal and Draftkings. Mondogoal is 7.9 million, Draftkings 4,800. Defensive mids, or even though he's not a stranger to a shot, you only have so many spots on DraftKings. So we'll see if he makes the final cut. Should definitely be in consideration right to the end though. At 4,800 with the upside of scoring a long goal or something like that. Townsend 6.9 million on Mondogoal, 3,800 on DraftKings. Can't see myself reaching for him without any set piece duty, but I think he did have 4 crosses last match. Presumably will keep his spot on the left wing. So as you know, I don't like Wijnaldum. I do like him as a player. I don't like him as a fantasy player because I think he's totally unpredictable. He has no floor. He is 11.1 million now on Mondogoal, which is very difficult. I mean, this is an easy matchup for him against West Brom. He's 5,000 on DraftKings with, let's see. Let's look at his game log and see if this sounds attractive to you. In his past 10 games, 21, 3, 4, 9, 7, 7, 18, 22, 5, 2. At 5,000, you're just praying for a goal, and you can do that in a lot of other places as well. I just have no interest in playing Wijnaldum, and like I said, I have my biases because I hate him on DraftKings. I tend to hate him on Mondogoal. He may not be as bad a play on Mondogoal. I still don't like the fact that he's not on the ball enough, but he's around the goal. He's got he's got a nose for the goal. He's always in the mix. He can score in a couple different ways. I mean, any player capable of scoring 4 goals in a game, you can't hate. I just think he's more of a GPP play eternally because of that inconsistency, but certainly a good matchup. On West Brom, and I know I've mentioned him a bunch of times, even for Mondogoal, because he's so cheap, is James McLean. He had 19 crosses recorded between corners and crosses on DraftKings last week. It's insane. It's his price is starting to catch up a little bit. He's up to 5,200 there. I still think he's a really strong play against a defense like Newcastle, particularly if Brunt is out. Sessegnon has sort of fallen by the wayside there. Hasn't done a whole lot. So McLean is a really strong play. He's only 4.8 million, still being held back by that red card and the fact that he fouls on Mondogoal. But that's a place where I'm not sure you should even look at him on Mondogoal, and I think that it might be a mistake to not play him on DraftKings. So there's a player. Robbie Brady might not be relevant right now. James McLean is a good explanation of the difference between scoring on Mondogoal and DraftKings in midfield. Moving on. This is going to get long, but here we are. Stoke and Everton. Shaqiri has been inconsistent. Probably not messing with him. Barkley bailed me out big time with those 2 penalties at the end of the Newcastle match. One at the 88th minute, one in extra time. Pretty incredible. But I'm not playing him at 12.5 million away against Stoke. I think that's probably insanity. And also not a particularly good DraftKings player because he is not taking corners anymore with with Baines around and wasn't really taking them anyways after a little while there. Would not be on penalty duty if not for Lukaku being injured and going off early. So sometimes you just get lucky. Swansea and Palace. Sigurdsson has been great lately. His price is starting to catch up a little bit. He's on penalty duty. He's on corners. He's on free kicks. He's the perfect DraftKings player. But he's now 6,500. This is a matchup with Palace looking a little bit weaker lately that the Swans can contend in. And if you like Pelosi up front, then Sigurdsson's still a decent play even at 6,500. You're hoping for 20 points or so, which is a lot. That's a really solid game. So at Palace, you've got Punching Out now. Cabaye should be returning from his ankle injury. He's 6,000 on DraftKings. He is 7 million on Mondogoal. Away match at Swansea. I don't think is actually going to be that attractive anymore. I think they're going to tighten up and play some better D and just make sure that they don't, just be soft at the back on our way to struggling towards relegation. So Spurs have potentially the strongest fantasy midfield in the Premier League right now. You've got Eriksen is playing out of his mind. Great DraftKings player, great Mondogoal player, has taken corner duty back from Lamela, who's been out. And then Dele Alli is an interesting case because he won't stop scoring. Scoring is a very nice trait on both Mondogoal and DraftKings. He's getting a decent amount of shots. He's really just a star in the making. And his price has been following suit. And I think that, he's sort of like a more reined in or skilled Wijnaldum. He's going to have a match, and it's going to happen soon, where he doesn't score a goal and he gets you 4 DraftKings points or 6 Mondogoal points, and you're going to be wondering why you paid for him and played a player that everybody else played too. But Watford has shown some signs of weakness over the past month or so. Tottenham is expected to take care of business here, so I would not blame you for playing Ali. That's not probably a player I'm going to be settling on personally, just because I think there's other options with a more reliable floor. But he's a goal and assist, 2-goal type player potentially. So a GPP, have at it. I would certainly support that. And last but not least, the Southampton-West Ham match. Tadic and Mane have been. Mane's been very, very poor most of the season. He hasn't scored in 2 months. He hasn't really been that active. So he's tough to use on both Mondogoal and DraftKings because his price is still going to be held up by previous performance, and it's just not there right now. So to take a guy at, I think he's 6,000 on DraftKings, 8.8 million on Mondogoal, take a guy that hasn't been performing at that level in a cash game is probably optimistic at best. In a GPP, it's still not a guy I would probably reach for. I don't see that ceiling there when he doesn't really cross that much. I'm probably just going to be off Mane for a while. We'll see if his price starts going back down to where it should be as like Azar's has. But I think Mane's unplayable right now. Tadic, on the other hand, should be on penalty duty. He's had 2 very tough matches lately. Manchester United and Arsenal. Before that, he came off the bench and scored in back-to-back matches. He's got tremendous upside. He crosses a lot. He can take some corners. So he can be just an absolute dominant player on DraftKings. Mondogoal, less so, without the crosses and corners. With late swap, which we've mentioned, he's a player you can risk on DraftKings, because on Mondogoal you are going to be stuck with a 0 or whatever he gets in the 10 minutes where he comes on, if they rotate. And Southampton does rotate, particularly in double game weeks. So I would never play him on Mondogoal. Not only is he not that effective on there, I don't have that much confidence that he's going to start. Koeman loves to rotate in Tadic in particular. I think they look at, his soft muscle tissue and how much strain they're putting on that, and decide that he's probably not going to be the best player to risk. So if I'm playing a GPP, because I think he's going to be very low owned, even though he's a good cash player when he plays, I can put in Tadic. If he's not in the starting lineup, I can play Mane. If I don't want to play Mane, I can play Cedric. I can play Charlie Austin. I can play Bertrand. I'm going to put him in my flex, so I can play any position, and I'm going to be able to get points out of that. So I'll lose the 2,000 if I go down from like a Tadic to a Cedric, but I'll have a player that can score points. And if Tadic does play, I have a very low-owned player with a high ceiling, and that's the kind of stuff we dream of, especially when it's a late game and you're the only one with any points coming in. West Ham, Payet, I just don't love him in this match. Southampton gives up a fair amount of corners, fair amount of crosses, and Payet is probably close to matchup proof, where he can perform anywhere. And West Ham's better away, or has been this season. I don't know if that's a tactical thing or a fluke. So I'm kind of talking myself into Payet, but I probably don't play him in this matchup. All right. So last but not least, and this will be a little bit quicker, is striker. So on Mondogoal, for strikers, if you look at a striker who's 9 million, you'd love for him to score a goal. Goals are worth 9. Then you've got assist potential, shots on target are 2 points. You've got passes, you've got fouls drawn. You can get towards the number that you want from a striker without the striker scoring a goal on Mondogoal. On Draftkings, when you look at 3x pricing, 3x price as your target score, and you've got a striker who's 7,000, you're looking for 20 plus points. That on Draftkings is a goal plus some shots plus a couple fouls. Getting to 20 is possible, happens. As I mentioned, goals are 12, assists are 6, but it's difficult and less predictable. So last match against Sunderland, Aguero is maybe a little bit better than par to score a goal. He scored early, of course, but then he didn't score again. He didn't do very well. He got about 2x. He's 8,800. Kane is 8,200. So it's much more difficult to get value on Draftkings. I'm starting to lose my voice now. I'm a little bit sick, so I'm going to move a little bit faster here. So in some cases on Draftkings, you're going to want to spend as little money as possible at striker. Some weeks that works out, some weeks it doesn't. I think it is the right strategy. This week we've got Doumbia. If he plays at 3,200, is a great play. Naismith for Norwich has looked pretty good. He had over 10 points and a goal the first match. He had 8 last match without a goal or an assist, which is pretty solid. If Agba and Lahore leads the line, he's 3,000 against Norwich. Not the craziest thing in the world. He's also 3.9 million on Mondogoal, so that's a very nice price if you want to get a goal out of him. In GBP, Firmino's 5,800 on DraftKings. I think he's a good play, just because he's on a great hot streak and been looking very good. Pelosi, as I mentioned before, 3,500 on DraftKings. Is a solid play. Charlie Austin, who we won't know if he plays or not, is 4,000. Long is 5,000. So if you want to pencil in Long and then Charlie Austin comes in, I think Austin would be a great play against West Ham. And then, as I mentioned, you've got Kane's going to be the big decision to make on DraftKings this week because at 8,200 against Watford, he could get you 12 to 16 points. Maybe gets one goal. He could get you 4 points. He could get you 30 points. There's just such a wide range of outcomes. So it really depends on the type of contest you're in. If you're in head-to-heads, if you're in 50-50s or double-ups, if you're in big double-ups, if you're in small double-ups, if you're in three-man leagues, you're going to see that there's a very wide variety of games that are played on DraftKings. And each of them can take a different strategy. In GPPs, you want to chase goals, but you can also win by getting a ton of crosses and corners. So you really just want to be able to get the most points for your money, not the most crazy concept, but can you do that with Kane at 8,200? His upside at 30 plus points is probably higher than a Payet at 7,700. But the floor is just so much higher for these midfielders that get corners and crosses on a predictable level that I think when you're making your cash teams, you want to spend as little money as possible at striker. You want to spend as much money as possible in midfield, and then defender and keeper. Keeper, you're taking a guy that you think is going to be your best chance at a clean sheet, and then defenders, you want probably closer to 3 to 4x values. So my 9-month-old is wailing because he probably wants me to stop talking. I'm sure a few of you out there do as well. So I hope this was informative. I hope that everybody gets a chance to play DraftKings. We should have a great bonus from them coming up here soon. If you can hold out on signing up, we would love to have you sign up through us. We don't make any money doing this. It's certainly a goal, but we haven't. So we would certainly appreciate that, as that's one of the ways we make money is helping these sites collect players. So hope that you've enjoyed this. Game week 25 should be great. You might be playing on both Mondogoal and DraftKings, which would be a difficult thing to be toggling your head back and forth between what's effective on each site, but plenty of people do it. They don't call it rush hour for no reason, and that hour becomes chaotic. I may try to come back and help out with that on Saturday if there's demand, but now it's time for me to go to bed, and I hope that everybody has a great week. See how DraftKings is. Check it out. I think you're going to like it, and we will see you again soon.